Hey everybody, welcome back to 11.0 week. I'm Jonathan Crow, Director of Community at NinjaOne, and I have a different member of our product management team with me today. This is his first live stream with us, so everybody give him a warm welcome. This is Bern Clark, and Bern is coming to us with a specific focus on Dropsuite and NinjaOne SaaS backup. He's going to be talking about a new addition to the capabilities there. He's going to be talking all about Entra and backing up that. And Bern, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Being brave, showing your face, taking time out of your busy week to share insights and talk about what you guys have been working on, which has been a lot. And so thank you for doing that. As a reminder to everybody, this is being recorded. If you joined in late or if you're wanting to share this with some colleagues after the fact, it'll be available right here where you're watching on YouTube right after this live session is done. Don't wait till the end. Ask Bern questions. He's going to be showing you stuff live on screen. Don't wait till the end. Jump right in. Ask him questions. I'll graciously interrupt him. And we'll try to answer everything that you have. So Bern, before we kick off, I know you have some things you're going to show us on screen, but let's talk a little bit about NinjaOne SaaS backup overall and the different capabilities. You and I were talking before we went live here. There's a few different SKUs, so we want to always be clear to the folks who are watching who are NinjaOne customers or just thinking about NinjaOne. How do they get access to this individual thing? How do they get access to backing up Entra?
Yeah, well, we basically have 4 SKUs for the SaaS backup side of things. So we've got SaaS backup, we've got the archiver, and then we have the equivalent of those things plus Entra. So you can think about the Entra component as an add-on, but it isn't in the portal to buy as an add-on. It's sold as a bundle. But if you're using backup or archiver, you could just buy one of the plus Entra plans, and then once you've decided what organization you want to give that plan to, then you're able to start accessing the Entra product. What I will say is, because once you bought the archiver plan, there's no downgrade path to the regular backup plan. So that's a one-way upgrade. But for Entra, if you go from backup to backup plus Entra, or from archiver to archiver plus Entra, you can go backwards again. So I just wanted to call that out, because I know a few folks that maybe got used to the one-way upgrade path that is going from backup to archiver, but Entra goes both ways, if you will. You can unravel that if later on you choose to change your mind.
Great, thanks for calling that out. Well, let's get right into it. I think in folks, you can answer. You can ask questions along the way, but Bern, let's go ahead and bring up your screen.
Yeah, let's go for it. Well, let's see. Firstly, if I'm technical enough to get a screen share going. So the first place I like to start is Microsoft has this article, Recovery Best Practices, which is kind of exactly what you need when you're trying to think about Entra backup and what it means. Because I think a lot of us, certainly I've been around long enough to remember. I mean, I one of my first jobs during college was doing technical support for small, what you would now call MSP in the UK. And I remember Active Directory becoming a thing with Windows 2000. And so I've been working with this thing for a long time now. But back in the day, like Active Directory was backed up because you backed up the server. So a lot of times you just weren't really thinking about backing up Active Directory. You just had your server backed up, and you hopefully, if everything went wrong, you had some backup. You would just recover things at the bit level. You're just backing up the hard drive. So like everything that you move to the cloud, Microsoft now owns the hard drive. You can have a bad time trying to back up the server that Microsoft's put your stuff on. So now you've got to back up the workloads independently. And I think there's sort of been a gap, I think, in the stack, in that there's been rightly a lot of focus on backing up the content. You want your mailbox backed up. You want your content and your documents and all of that business data protected. I think it took a lot of customers a little bit to kind of get used to the idea that Microsoft wasn't backing those things up. And the same thing is true of Entra. The fact that it's in the cloud, it comes with Microsoft's like baseline levels of protection, but there's still the extent to which you're on your own if things get corrupted or otherwise broken from an Entra perspective. And Microsoft's pretty forthright in its language. Basically, bad things are going to happen to you. It's not a question of if, but when. And so they've rather helpfully put this article together to kind of talk about what some of those things might mean, and also a different picture of the shared responsibility model that you might have been used to if you've been backing up the content and the data. So there's some important things to kind of think about in terms of what it means to be backing up and protecting Entra, and the fact that Microsoft doesn't exactly have out-of-the-box recovery for a lot of those things. So I think this is sort of an important thing to sort of internalize and think about. And I think there's a couple of important things that I'll call out here, and then we'll kind of look at those in the demo in terms of what they mean. Firstly, I mean, Microsoft's being pretty clear that the ability to recover prior configurations and basically hit the Control Z is on you. But they also like make an explicit point of documenting the known good states. And I think that this ability to be documenting the state of Entra over time as a feature of what you would expect of a backup product is something that's maybe a little bit more at the forefront than maybe sort of thinking about backing up content. You obviously want versions of content over time so that you can roll back to a place that is valid. But for configuration data like Entra, the different things can be moving around, and the ability to kind of be able to understand how the system has evolved over time is an important part of being able to protect and ultimately recover the system, potentially more so than just net the ability to hit the restore button. So let's get us acclimated to kind of the demo and where we're at. So I have one of Microsoft's demo tenants behind the scenes here. So it's real world in the sense that I've got some users and an Entra environment that we can kind of look at and understand. I'll start here from the Entra dashboard. You can see, if you're looking closely enough at the URL, I demo from one of our sandbox environments. And so that's like our engineering deploy the latest and greatest here for me to show. But this is disconnected from the regular flow of the environment. So I talked a little bit about the procurement process for Entra, and you buy these plus Entra SKUs. Once you've bought that SKU, you access the Entra dashboard by going through the Ninja portal into like the Dropsuite portal, if you will. And then once you're in the Dropsuite portal, you'll be able to see the organizations that you have under backup. And then for the organization you've assigned the plan to, you'll be able to see the Access Entra button in there. So there's some other content and things that you can find in the knowledge base about how to do that. I'm not going to show it live because my demo is disconnected, but it's a reasonably straightforward flow to give you a peek into some of the stuff that's coming with some of the future versions as we sort of get through to version 13, like this integration between the historical Dropsuite portals and the Ninja portals post-acquisition. Like there's a big investment to really tighten up the integration there and just sort of make the whole experience a lot more seamless. So pardon I dust, if you will, for right now, in terms of just like where we're tidying up a few things and get some things polished off in terms of that integration. But once you're in the product, you should be up and roaring and ready to go. So what I'll say while we're sort of sitting here is that although this product is new to the Ninja stack, it's been a Dropsuite product for almost exactly a year. I think we're like a year and 2 or 3 weeks by this point. We released the first version of Entra Backup on the Dropsuite side shortly before Thanksgiving last year, and so it has been in the market for a good 12 months now, and we've done a lot of things to kind of iron out various V1 creases and expand the breadth and depth of the product. And so an advantage of it entering the N1 NinjaOne ecosystem now is that you're also getting something which has had some time in market to kind of settle and kind of get bedded in.
I'll interrupt you just for a second there, Bern, if you don't mind. I know we have I noticed there's familiar names here in the chat, and David, if I'm not mistaken, has been a good Dropsuite, proud Dropsuite customer for quite a bit. Did also just want to bring up that Dan Myers, our product manager of NinjaOne Backup, is going to be joining us on Friday for another live stream about OS deployment. But we can bug him then. I know that he has been sharing some sneak peeks and talking a lot about what you're referring to in terms of the integration and the steps going forward to make it more cohesive. And so we'll bug him on Friday and see if we can get some more sneak peeks and process updates around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great call out. Dan is definitely the expert on how all of the integration bits are coming together. I'm not going to stray too far out of my comfort zone. What happens within the product is definitely the domain I like to stick with. So I encourage everyone on a good day to bug Dan if you get the opportunity. If he's show up and make himself available, then bugging him is definitely a practice I would recommend. So yeah, if we click into the tenant, we get here is a set of the things that we have under backup. Some of these things lend themselves to a demo a little bit better than others. So some of the things around BitLocker keys and the device backup, you need to fabricate some real world devices to have those. And so I don't have those available in this particular tenant, but everything, all of the different object types have the same types of functionality. So everything that I'll be able to show you, I'm going to spend most of my time up here in users because I think that's the most straightforward thing to understand. Certainly we can look at some of these other ones if there's something specific we want to dive into. They'll kind of have the same overall flow and experience and feature set. So anything that would exist down here is going to look and feel the same. So with this version of the products, we back up the users, the groups, the roles, and administrators. Both configurations are around assignments of built-in roles as well as any custom roles. The application registrations and their service principals are protected here. Under security and compliance policies, we have things like the conditional access policies, but also their component parts, their building blocks, if you will. So the named locations, authentication strengths, and contexts. Those things are all included under this umbrella of security and compliance policies. Similarly for device management policies, and then obviously BitLocker keys, Entra registered devices, and then Intune managed devices. All that configuration data is also protected down here. So let's click into users. As the page loads, there's a few places where you might notice just a quick delay, and that's because whenever we're loading data in the Entra product, we are querying Entra for the latest data, because a lot of people, kind of like I have here, will have their Entra admin center in one tab and the Entra backup product in a different tab, and be often trying to diagnose something, trying to root cause some issue, things along that nature. And the ability to kind of always have the live data means that while you're trying to look in Entra and while you're trying to look in backup, you've always got an up-to-date picture of what's happening. And so in this screen, we're grabbing the latest version of the user and also their Entra status in here. So if you're trying to track down things that have been deleted and recovered and things like that, you can see the latest status there. A couple of things that I'll call out quickly on this view is immediately we're giving a picture of the first backup and when the most recent change was detected and the number of snapshots here. So let me explain a little bit about how this works. So today we run a backup every 24 hours. So over the next few releases, you'll see us crank that up to potentially near real time, certainly multiple times through the day you'd be able to be taking Entra backups. But a new snapshot is only taken if we notice a change. And so from that, you can infer the number of changes that have happened to a specific object. And in terms of the previous point on the Microsoft article about documenting known good states, this tracking of changes over time is a good ability to start building up a library of those prior configurations. But you can also infer from it a certain sort of change delta tracking type of capability, where the fact that there are lots of snapshots means that there's lots of different changes happening to an object. And so we can see here, the plot spoiler is I use this user as my demo user, but there might be any number of reasons why a user might have 43 snapshots when everyone else has maybe got less than 10 snapshots. So you've immediately got the ability to start discovering whether maybe something fishy is going on in your tenant just by getting a sense of kind of the backup data and what that looks like. So we're able to see that this user has a large number of snapshots. And from that, we can infer a bunch of changes are being made, and that might give us some clues as to some things that we might want to drill into and investigate. So let's do that. Let's open up this user and start looking at what's happening. As I mentioned before, anytime we open something up, we query Entra for the live data. And so that's what that quick pause there is about. We can see we brought back the latest version of the Entra data and compared that to the most recent backup snapshot. And everything that's different is highlighted in red for me to quickly review. We can see here that the screen is by default on the mutable properties only, because for the most part, when you're recovering data, it's only the data that can change. That's interesting, but we can show all of the attributes in here, and you can see that things like the created date and the ID and some of the things that are read-only values in Entra, those are visible in here. We just hide them by default to reduce the amount of clutter. So we can see here, there's a few different attributes highlighted in red. If I want to, I can go back through all of the different snapshot versions for this user. And you can see here, we show the top 10. But if you want to, you can actually drill into this experience and find snapshots with a little bit more granularity. Surfing through 43 snapshots and trying to compare them all would be a somewhat arduous task. And so we've created this more advanced snapshot search capability here. So as you might expect, if I want to search more specifically for a date frame, I could go ahead and do that. What most people find more interesting is the ability to search for data based on something changing. So we see here a range of different attributes have changed here. I'll pick the job title one, just because I can see from the screen that that's one of the attributes that's changed. So if I want to go in here and say, hey, like, how many times has the job title changed for this user? It could be any attribute you like. If it were a security policy, it could be like, show me the times where MFA got turned on or off here, or whether the policy went from active to reporting only to inactive, like all those different states. Regardless of the property, you can ask the system to inspect changes to that attribute. So we can see here, we've gone back and we've looked at all of the different snapshots that we've accumulated, and we're able to see here all of the different places where the job title has changed and the time that it changed. Something that we're working on in the immediate term that you'll hopefully see in the coming few months is the whodunit column. So we've got what the change was and when it happened, but not who made the change. And so we're going to add that capability into the product, and then downstream from that, give you the ability to search for changes based on things that might have made changes. So enriching that ability to do sleuthing and diagnostics. And if in some scenario somebody runs a PowerShell script and they have regrets later, you could go say, hey, show me all of the snapshots where this user made a change. And so if they ran a script that went and made changes in a whole bunch of places, you'd be able to bring all of those back and be able to start the recovery process. So nevertheless, we've got all these different snapshots here that we can look through. I will maybe pick one out at random here. Typically what I do when I pick one out at random is I pick a snapshot that's exactly the same as the live value, and all of my pretty red comparisons disappear. Oh, I got lucky. I picked a snapshot, still got a bunch of changes, so that still looks nice and colorful. So you can see that we could pick any different snapshot that we like, compare it with the live value, and then kind of drill in and explore all the different snapshots, looking for different changes that have been made. And so the ability to kind of see whether an attribute has changed in there. One of the other capabilities that I kind of glossed over that you might have seen, I can also search for when an attribute last contained a specific value. So in terms of like going back and trying to find those last known good values. For example, this user, maybe they changed role, some onboarding workflow got carried away and said, hey, people who work in marketing, they get all of these things. And so the fact that they moved from sales to marketing might have meant that like that workflow deprovisioned some things that maybe that user still needed. Maybe you went and misconfigured a security policy and you're like, hey, it worked before, not exactly sure what I changed, but I know that when this thing was set to this other value, that everything was working. And you can see here that we can search for a specific snapshot, bring back that snapshot, and then see all the different other changes that might have happened at the same time. So this ability to explore the data and be able to understand different changes and sort of work backwards from some point of failure is something we've invested in as part of what it means to deliver recovery from an Entra backup perspective. Going backwards in time is obviously important, but being able to explore what's changed between a last known good state and the current state is an important one.
Bern, would it be would now be a good time to talk about retention, or do you want to hold off and keep going and come circle back to that one?
You know, I saw the question pop up. I didn't have a neat segue to it, so I was kind of sitting and wondering if I could just answer it outright. We hold the data indefinitely at this point in time, so that the data is we will keep those backups forever. So it's got an unlimited amount of data, both in terms of the how much of it there is and how far backwards it would go. I think it's also maybe I'll segue into a point I forgot to make when we were talking about how to buy Entra. So as you recall, it's sold like either backup plus Entra or archiver plus Entra, but you pay for the users whose data you want to back up. So like maybe if I clear this out the way, if we say like, look, we're interested in backing up the data for this user, I'll back up my own data. Maybe this guy, maybe I say, hey, I've got 4 users whose mailbox, Teams, and OneDrive data I want to have backed up, and that's it. If based on that scenario, out of the 20 or so users we have here, you only pay to back up for them, we still back up all of the data in Entra. So regardless of how many users you've licensed for backup or archiver, we'll always back up all of the Entra data. So there's not like an exact user licensing. You pay for the data side, and everything in Entra is always backed up regardless of how many users. So in terms of, I suppose it's a somewhat ugly segue from data retention to how you're licensed it, but in terms of thinking about like how the data is held, is that all of the Entra data is backed up all of the time.
All right, thanks for that.
All right, let me clear these off. Any other questions from the chat we can maybe address before I?
Yeah, well, I've interrupted your flow here. Conditional. This is from Robert. Thanks, Robert. Conditional access policies can be recovered natively. Can you restore previous versions of policies with this?
Yeah. So, I mean, like there are a handful of things in Entra that have a recycle bin. Users, groups have them, and then I think some of the other objects, as you point out, they have certain amount of restoration capability in Entra. So I mean, users I think are kept in the recycle bin for 30 days, and then afterwards they go into this hard deleted state. And so users policies, we can do the same thing. We can recreate those. In some instances, like not everything can be recreated from scratch, and I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, and I think it might be more on the Intune policy side of things. You'll have to forgive me. Some of these things, I think conditional access policies are an example of they have like certain requirements of the related object itself, and so I think if you're putting a conditional access policy back, like it requires, I think, a named location or an authentication structure or something like that. I forget exactly what the core requirements are to build a conditional access policy, like what the mandatory fields are. So sometimes when you're restoring those things from a hard deleted state, there are those dependencies on some other things that, if they're not available, can make that maybe inhibit the process there. I don't have any, well, I do have one hard deleted authentication strength in here. And so you can see that if we need to recreate those from scratch, we can also do that.
All right, perfect.
Just scanning the rest of the questions there.
I think we're good for now. And folks, if we're wrong, if I miss anything, or if you have others, let us know.
All right. So in the where were we? We were back here, I think, looking at this user. I opened up the conditional access policies table just briefly. You can kind of see we've got the same kind of data, and it would load in the same way over here. So a couple of other things to call out. Obviously, I can always be refreshing that live data as you saw in the panel loaded. Something else I'll call out here, you'll have seen the download button a handful of times. I can download data for a specific object. I can download data for a whole range of different objects. If I go all the way back out, I can start downloading data for everything in the tenant. You'll see that you can't download BitLocker keys because that's census. There's a couple of things here we're doing to try and make it not quite straightforward to egress security data. But you can see that all of this data is available for download. I'll hit the download button for funsies. We'll pick that up a little bit later. So you can, if you want, take the data. We'll show it once the download is ready. But you get a zip file that has all of the JSON data in it. The JSON data is not proprietary to us. It's structured in the same way the Graph API has given it to us. So if you are pretty nifty with a script, you can take the data that we have here and use it for other purposes. So there's a couple of things that the product doesn't do quite yet. We don't offer the ability to do a bulk restore, for example, or the ability to restore to a different tenant. Both of those things, among others, are in the pipeline, and so you won't have to wait too long before those capabilities are available. But they are an example of a current limitation of the product where if you want to download the data and perform some of those operations offline, you've got that capability in there as well. So the data's never held hostage and not stored in any proprietary way. And if for whatever reason you need to go away, get your hands on it, it is available and set up in a way that it's structured the way the Graph API would expect the attributes to be named in order to make that a more straightforward process. But let's go look at what's going on in the restore process here. So we can see here, as part of the restore, you've got like a good clean view of the different things that are available for restore. And I can cherry pick the specific attributes that I want to restore. And so I might say, well, you know what, everything was good for this user apart from the job change. Like maybe somebody gave us a spreadsheet that had an updated version of her name and a whole bunch of other things and a new office location. But somebody accidentally, I don't know, did a fill down on that spreadsheet for the job title and then gave you that spreadsheet. And now all you want to do is restore that. Arguably, you would just copy and paste the value once you knew it. Again, that's kind of why showing the live data. A lot of people are just like, making the change in Entra is easy. It's knowing what the correct value is supposed to be that's difficult. You probably wouldn't just use the product to come in and restore something simple like that. But for the purposes of doing a demo, let's imagine it's completely impossible to just copy and paste this value and that I want to be able to do a restore. So you'll see here, I get intercepted as part of this process where it says that I need elevated privileges. So maybe let's go here. Let me duplicate this tab so that we can navigate maybe a little bit back out here. So the reason I'm being intercepted is for the Entra backup product, there are two applications that we use. We have a backup app, which obviously is required, and we have a restore app, which is optional. And so the reason we have this is, firstly, we see a lot of enterprise applications when you're registering them in Entra. Like they just ask for God level privileges across every possible thing that you might want to do in Entra, because from a software development perspective, continuously asking for new permissions can feel cumbersome. And so a lot of vendors just say like, hey, let's just ask for everything we might ever need upfront and give us the ability to read it and write it and do whatever we like. And that kind of puts you in this sort of sticky situation, if you will, where you've done a lot of good things to control what users are able to do. You've got your conditional access policies and Ninja policies and all these different things set up to manage users and their endpoints. And then you find yourself with your arm up your back installing this application in your Entra tenant that can do whatever it likes. And then you have to think about someone using that application and their ability to kind of ride on its coattails and get access to a whole bunch of different things. So there's that type of that sort of, I guess, posture that we want to do better. And also specifically for Entra, there are these scenarios where, for example, let's say I delete a global administrator. I could, as a user of the Entra backup application, come in and restore that global administrator. If it's been hard deleted, what we're doing is creating a facsimile of the original. And because it's a new user that's just a copy, we're going to have to provide it with a password. Entra is going to ask us for a password anytime we create a new user. So I've then got a scenario where I'm able to use the backup product to restore a global administrator, and then I know the password for that. And you might not want everyone who's able to use the Entra backup application to be able to maybe do things like that. So in order to mitigate that, we give you this choice. And so you can, if you want, install the Restore app in perpetuity if you feel pretty good about who's able to access the Ninja portal and then the Entra product, and you feel like you've got good controls there. You could just install this app, and then anytime you go to restore data, you won't be intercepted by this modal. You'll just be able to hit restore and go have at it. But in this example, I don't have the Restore app installed. And so what I will need to do in order to perform this restore is authenticate with the target Entra environment. And I think based on how I've got the screen shared, you're not going to see the little window that pops up. But what pops up is the sign into Entra. And so what it's basically doing is it's authorizing the Restore app temporarily. It authorizes it for 30 minutes, and then you can perform restores within that 30 minutes. But what it does is it asks the target Entra environment it asks the target Entra environment whether I have the permissions to install the Restore app. And so I don't gain, like if I'm trying to restore a global administrator, I already have to be someone who's got the required permissions to create a global administrator in order to perform the restore process. So we have that option in there so that depending on what path you want to go down, you don't necessarily need to have an application sitting there with God level privileges all of the time. You can have that installed temporarily and make the user sitting in front of the screen kind of go through that hoop and have the target environment be your source of authority over who's able to make those changes. So I think that's a pretty good whistle stop tour. I think we can see here the restore process got queued up. Took about 7 seconds to happen. The great thing about backing up and restoring Entra is that things work or don't work typically inside a handful of seconds, and so you don't have to wait too long to kind of know whether there were any issues with it, whether the Graph API had a problem with what you're doing, anything like that. So that troubleshooting process is typically pretty rapid fire. So I think that's the short and long of all the different things that are exciting about the Entra backup product. I'm just giving a quick scan of the questions here. I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, we'll do a last call here, and thank you, Bern, for walking through that. Oh, that was a ton that you packed in. Yeah, folks, we'll stick around for another minute here for last call for questions, and while we're doing that, I will remind you that 11.0 week continues. With all the releases of NinjaOne, they're now getting so big. There's so much to cover. We want to make sure that we take deep dives and give you guys a chance to dive a little bit deeper into individual parts of it. So tomorrow we're going to be looking at reporting with data tables. And so reporting for NinjaOne users, you have probably been asking for updates for reporting for quite a while. And Kite Archer, our PM there, has been really driving a lot of great changes. And so this is another exciting one that's coming. He'll be going over that tomorrow. And then we're going to round out the week with some more updates around ticketing, documentation, PSA, and finally closing out with Dan Myers, who I mentioned before, talking about OS deployment. So a lot of good things coming along the down with 11.0, which a lot of folks here on the call I know have already had access to. Anyone in Europe or Australia, other places in the world. North America, you're going to be waking up, let's see, on Thursday morning, I think is when you'll have access to 11. There'll be lots of things. If you have specific questions, you can always reach out to your account manager. You can dive into our Discord. Lots of people are discussing around that. Yep, that's right. Hadar's reporting. You'll be there tomorrow. We'll see you then. And lots more to come. So thank you everybody for taking time out of your day. Bern, thank you for taking time. This is your first stream. Definitely a success. We'll have you back on if you'll do it. Hopefully this wasn't too painful for you.
Well, it wasn't too painful for me. I think it's in the eye of the beholder. If the audience like having me, then I'm always glad to come back.
we'll give a thumbs up. We'll see if they want you back on. We do have one other question. Thanks for asking us. Can I use this backup to back up Dynamic 365 from tenant A to restore to tenant B, like when companies merge, for example?
I think there's two pieces going on with that. One, if we mean Dynamics, I don't think Dynamics is a workload that's currently supported under backup. For Entra specifically, today we can only restore to tenant A, so we can only restore to the tenant we're backing up from. Like I said, our workaround for that is the ability to take the data, download it, and then you could kind of either just go through that, put that back manually, use a script, but a capability we do want to add to the product in the not too distant future is the ability to restore to a different tenant than you're backing up from. So you will see that capability over time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And it sounds like we're aware of that need. But as always, with anything that you're seeing within the product, you should be able to go to our product boards, which is where you can check and see for other requests. You can upvote them. You can also create new requests and make sure that the PM see those. And that's how we make our roadmap. We listen to you all and we see what are the needs, what are the most impactful things we can do for the most amount of people. And that's how we build Ninja. So thank you all for being a part of that process. Thank you all for taking time out of your week and joining us here. We'll see a lot of you tomorrow. And Bern, we'll see you sometime in the future.
I look forward to it.